The excavation. Dr. Krelnak scraped another layer of crystallized sediment from the ancient chamber wall. His research team had been excavating Site Omega-7 for 3 standard months, uncovering remnants of a civilization that had vanished 12,000 years ago. The predecessors, as they were known throughout the galaxy, had been a mystery for millennia. They had built wonders that modern science still couldn't replicate, then disappeared without explanation. Today, they had found something different. "Director, you need to see this," called out his assistant, Vorna, her antennae quivering with excitement. Krelnax made his way through the underground chamber, his 6 legs carrying him carefully over fragile archaeological remains. What Vorna had uncovered made his breath catch in his respiratory sacs. It was a sphere, roughly 2 meters in diameter, made of a dark metallic substance that seemed to absorb light. Carved into its surface were symbols in the predecessor language, along with mathematical formulas that made Krelnax's head spin. But what drew his attention most were the warning signs surrounding it. Red markings. Danger symbols. Skull equivalents from a dozen ancient species. "It's a weapon," Vorna whispered, her voice trembling. "Look at the containment field generators around it. They built this entire facility just to keep it locked away." Krelnax examined the inscriptions more carefully. His translation device struggled with the archaic dialect, but certain words came through clearly: destruction, apocalypse, last resort, never awaken. The human arrives. The Galactic Council had strict protocols for discoveries of this magnitude. Within 2 days, a fleet arrived at Site Omega-7, including representatives from every major civilization. The sphere was too dangerous to be left in the hands of a single species. Among the delegates was someone unexpected, a human. Dr. Sarah Chen was an archaeologist from Earth, a young species that had only joined the Galactic Council 40 years ago. Humans were still viewed with suspicion by many older races. They were unpredictable, emotional, and had a disturbing tendency to ignore rules they considered inconvenient. "Dr. Krelnax," Sarah said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "Thank you for allowing me to participate in this investigation." Krelnax reluctantly touched her hand with one of his manipulator limbs. "The council insisted on human representation. Though I confess, I don't understand why. Your species has no experience with predecessor technology." Sarah smiled, an expression Krelnax had learned meant either friendliness or hidden intentions. "Maybe that's exactly why you need us. Sometimes fresh eyes see what familiarity misses." Over the following days, the scientific team worked to understand the sphere. They ran every scan possible without actually touching it. Energy signatures suggested it contained power equivalent to a supernova. Material analysis indicated it was made of elements that shouldn't exist according to known physics. "It's definitely a weapon," declared General Throck, a military representative from the Kryn Empire. "The predecessors built it to fight something, probably whatever caused their extinction. We should destroy it immediately." "We can't destroy it," countered scientist Primzella of the Luminous Collective. "Our tests show it's indestructible by any known means. Any attempt might trigger it." "Then we bury it again," suggested Ambassador Queltar. "Seal this entire planet, declare it forbidden space, and forget we ever found it." Sarah had been quiet throughout these debates, studying the inscriptions with an intensity that made Krelnax nervous. Finally, she spoke. "You're all wrong," she said simply. The chamber fell silent. Species that had civilizations spanning millions of years turned to stare at the human who had been spacefaring for barely a century. "I beg your pardon?" General Throck's scales bristled with indignation. Sarah stood up, walking closer to the sphere. Guards tensed, but she made no move to touch it. "The translation is wrong." "Not technically wrong, but contextually wrong. You're reading these symbols through the lens of fear." "The warnings are clear," Krelnax protested. "Danger. Destruction. Apocalypse." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "But look at the mathematical formulas. They're not weapons calculations. They're growth algorithms. Population models. Ecological balance equations. She pointed to a series of symbols near the base of the sphere. And this word you translated as never awaken? The root structure is similar to phrases meaning only when ready in 3 other predecessor texts we've found. It's not a prohibition. It's a test. The truth revealed. Sarah spent the next week working with the translation computers, cross-referencing thousands of predecessor documents. Slowly, a different picture emerged. The predecessors didn't disappear because of war or disaster, Sarah explained to the assembled council. They ascended. They evolved beyond physical form. But before they left, they knew other species would eventually rise to take their place. She gestured to the sphere. This isn't a weapon. It's a gift. A seed. Inside this sphere is everything a young civilization needs to avoid the mistakes the predecessors made. Technology, yes, but also philosophy, art, ethical frameworks. Instructions on how to grow without destroying yourselves. Then why the warnings? Demanded General Throck. Why the containment fields? Because it's dangerous, Sarah said. Just not in the way you think. Knowledge is dangerous. Power is dangerous. The predecessors knew that giving this to a species too early would destroy them faster than any weapon. So they created a test. She pointed to the intricate locking mechanism surrounding the sphere. This isn't a containment field. It's a puzzle. Only a species that has achieved sufficient technological advancement, ethical development, and most importantly, cooperation between different minds and perspectives, can open it. Krelnax felt his worldview shifting. You're saying we've been guarding a gift, not a weapon. I'm saying, Sarah replied, that the predecessors understood something fundamental. The greatest danger any civilization faces isn't external threats. It's internal division. Fear of the different. Inability to work together. She looked around the chamber at the dozens of species present. They built this puzzle to require cooperation. No single species can solve it alone. I've been running simulations. It needs the mathematical insight of the luminous collective, the pattern recognition of the Kryn, the temporal understanding of the Venth, and yes, the lateral thinking of humans. You want us to open it? Zella's light patterns flickered with uncertainty. I want us to prove we're ready, Sarah said. Not ready for a weapon, but ready for the responsibility that comes with true advancement. The decision. The debate raged for days. Some species advocated for leaving the sphere sealed. Others wanted to attempt opening it. A few still insisted it should be destroyed, test or not. It was Krelnax who finally broke the deadlock. Dr. Chen is right, he announced. I've been studying the predecessors my entire life, and I've been blinded by my own fears. Every warning they left behind was accompanied by an invitation. Every danger sign had instructions for those brave enough to look closer. He turned to the assembled council. We claim to be advanced civilizations, but we've been acting like frightened children. The predecessors left this for us. For all of us. Are we going to honor their faith in our potential, or are we going to prove ourselves unworthy? The vote was close, but ultimately, the decision was made. They would attempt to open the sphere. The puzzle proved as challenging as Sarah had predicted. It took representatives from 17 different species, working in harmony, to align the mechanisms correctly. Krelnax contributed his historical knowledge. The luminous collective solved equations in 11 dimensions. The Kryn identified patterns invisible to most other species. And Sarah, the human, kept reminding everyone to step back and look at the bigger picture when they got too focused on individual details. When the final mechanism clicked into place, the sphere didn't explode or unleash destruction. It simply opened, like a flower blooming. Inside was light. Pure, beautiful light that somehow conveyed information directly into the minds of everyone present. Knowledge flowed like water. Not just technical specifications or scientific data, but understanding. Wisdom earned over millions of years of civilization. Krelnax gasped as he comprehended truths he'd spent his life seeking. Beside him, Sarah was crying, overwhelmed by the beauty of what they'd found. They believed in us, she whispered. They left all of this behind because they believed someone would eventually be worthy of it. But the sphere had one more surprise. As the light faded, it reformed into something new. A message, written in a language that combined elements from every species present. To those who opened this, you have proven yourselves ready not because you were perfect, but because you were willing to work together despite your differences. This is the true test of civilization. The gift we leave you is not meant to make you like us. It is meant to help you become the best version of yourselves. Use it wisely. Use it together. And when you have grown beyond its lessons, leave your own gift for those who will come after. That is how the universe evolves. That is how light persists in darkness. The ripple effect. 6 months later. The discovery at Site Omega 7 sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The knowledge contained in the predecessor sphere was being carefully shared among all council species, but its greatest impact wasn't technical, it was philosophical. Sarah Chin found herself in an unexpected position, ambassador for humanity to the newly formed Cooperative Research Initiative. The sphere had proven that collaboration between different minds produced better results than any single species working alone. Now, the galaxy was scrambling to reorganize itself around this principle. You look tired, Krelnax observed as Sarah joined him in the orbital research station above Site Omega 7. The planet had been transformed from a quarantine zone into the galaxy's premier center for cooperative learning. I am tired, Sarah admitted, accepting the nutrient drink he offered. Do you know how hard it is to convince species who've been enemies for thousands of years to work in the same laboratory? Krelnax's mandibles clicked in amusement. Actually, yes. I spend most of my time doing exactly that. The Kryn and the Venth have had border disputes for 3 millennia. Getting them to collaborate on stellar engineering projects has been educational. Is it working, though? Sarah asked. I mean, really working? Or are we just putting a nice face on the same old conflicts? The new discovery. Before Krelnax could answer, alarms blared throughout the station. Sarah's communicator buzzed with urgent messages. What now? She muttered, pulling up the data stream. A new site had been discovered. Another predecessor facility, this one on a moon orbiting a gas giant in the Forgotten Reaches. The preliminary scans showed something that made Sarah's blood run cold. It's another sphere, Krelnax said, reading the same data. But this one is different. Bigger. And it's not sealed underground. It's been active this entire time, broadcasting a signal we couldn't detect until we understood the technology from the first sphere. What kind of signal? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. A distress call. 12,000 years old, repeating endlessly. Krelnax's voice was grim. The predecessors didn't just ascend, Sarah. They're calling for help. The mission. Within hours, an emergency council session was convened. The revelation that the predecessors might still exist in some form, and might be in danger, changed everything. This could be a trap, argued General Throck, ever the military mind. The first sphere was a test. This could be something worse. Or it could be what they intended all along, Sarah countered. Think about it. The first sphere taught us cooperation and gave us advanced knowledge. What if that was preparation? What if they knew we'd need those skills to help them? Scientist Primezella's light pattern swirled with calculation. The energy readings from this second site are vastly higher than the first. Whatever's there, it's not just a data repository. It's active. Possibly alive. Then we need to investigate, Krelnax said firmly. The predecessors gave us their legacy. If they need help, we owe them the attempt. The council was divided, but ultimately, a decision was reached. A joint expedition would be sent to the Forgotten Reaches. Every species would contribute their best scientists, engineers, and diplomats. And they requested that Sarah Chen lead the human contingent. Why me? Sarah had protested when offered the position. I'm an archaeologist, not a space explorer. You saw the truth when everyone else saw only fear, Krelnax replied. That's exactly the perspective we need. The journey. The expedition fleet consisted of 30 ships from 17 different species. The journey to the Forgotten Reaches would take 3 weeks, even with the enhanced propulsion systems derived from the first sphere's knowledge. Sarah spent her time studying every scrap of data they had on the predecessors, looking for clues about what they might find. She worked alongside scientists whose biology was so different from hers that communication required 3 layers of translation, yet somehow, they made it work. One evening, or what passed for evening on the ship's artificial cycle, she found herself in the observation deck with an unlikely companion. General Throck had been assigned to the expedition as military advisor, despite his initial opposition. Beautiful, isn't it? Sarah said, looking out at the stars streaming past. Throck's scales rippled and what she'd learned was his species' equivalent of a shrug. Space is space. I've seen it all my life. But have you really looked at it? Sarah persisted. That's what the predecessors tried to teach us. That knowledge without wonder is just information. They didn't just give us technology. They gave us back our sense of awe. Throck was quiet for a moment. You humans are strange. You barely left your home system, yet you speak of the universe like you own it. Not own, Sarah corrected. Belong to. There's a difference. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We want to be part of it. Even the dangerous parts? Especially the dangerous parts. That's where the real discoveries are. Arrival at the Forgotten Moon. When the fleet finally reached the moon, they found something that defied every expectation. The second sphere wasn't sealed in a chamber. It floated freely in space, massive as a small moon itself, surrounded by rings of energy that pulsed with colors Sarah had no names for. But what stunned everyone was what surrounded the sphere. Ships. Thousands of them. Their predecessor vessels, Krelnax breathed, his voice trembling with emotion. But they're not derelict. They're in some kind of stasis. Sarah studied the readings. It's not a distress call. It's a beacon. They're not asking for rescue. They're waiting for something. For what? Throck demanded. Sarah smiled, understanding dawning. For us. They're waiting for us to be ready. As if responding to her words, the sphere began to change. The energy rings contracted, forming a pathway through the field. An invitation. All ships, hold position, Sarah ordered. I'm going in alone. Absolutely not, Throck protested. It could be. It could be the most important moment in galactic history, Sarah interrupted. And someone needs to take the first step. That's what humans do. Before anyone could stop her, Sarah launched a small shuttle from the human vessel. She piloted it carefully through the energy pathway, her heart pounding as she approached the massive sphere. When she got close enough to touch it, the sphere opened. The truth unfolds. Inside, Sarah found herself in a space that couldn't exist. It was vast as a galaxy, yet she could see every part of it at once. And she wasn't alone. The predecessors were there. Not as physical beings, but as patterns of consciousness woven into the fabric of space itself. They communicated directly with her mind, bypassing language entirely. Why am I here? Sarah asked, her thoughts echoing in the infinite space. The answer came not as words, but as understanding. The predecessors had ascended 12,000 years ago, but they hadn't abandoned the physical universe. They'd been watching, waiting, guiding. The spheres were their way of preparing younger species for a choice. What choice? Sarah asked. The predecessors showed her. The universe was dying. Not soon, but inevitably. In 100 billion years, entropy would claim everything. But there was another path. Evolution didn't have to stop at the physical. Species could ascend, joining the predecessors in a realm beyond matter and energy, preserving consciousness itself against the heat death of reality. But why wait? Sarah pressed. Why not bring us all now? The answer was beautiful in its simplicity. Because growth mattered. Because the journey shaped the destination. Because a civilization that was handed ascension would be different from one that earned it through cooperation, struggle, and choice. So the first sphere was a test, Sarah realized. But not to see if we were worthy. To see if we were ready to understand. Yes. And the answer was yes. Humanity and its new allies had proven themselves ready not by being perfect, but by choosing to work together despite their imperfections. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now, you choose. All of you. Every species in the council. You can continue as you are, living physical lives, advancing at your own pace. Or you can begin the path toward ascension. It will take millennia. It will require dedication from countless generations. But the option is now open. And if we choose not to ascend? Then you continue growing. The choice will remain available. There is no wrong answer, only different paths. The return. When Sarah returned to the fleet, she carried knowledge that would reshape galactic civilization. The council spent months debating, discussing, arguing about the revelation. Some species chose to pursue ascension immediately, dedicating themselves to the spiritual and philosophical development required. Others chose to continue their physical existence, at least for now. And many, like humanity, decided to walk both paths simultaneously, some individuals pursuing ascension while others remained physical, keeping both options alive. Krelnax found Sarah on the observation deck of the research station 6 months after the expedition. She was watching the stars again, as she often did. The council has reached a final decision, he said. We're establishing permanent research facilities at both sphere sites. Cooperative teams from all species, studying the paths forward. Both paths, Sarah noted. Physical and ascended. Yes. It seems the predecessor's final lesson was that there doesn't have to be one right answer. Diversity of thought, diversity of choice, that's what makes civilization strong. Sarah smiled. You know what the crazy thing is? 6 months ago, our species was arguing about trade routes and border disputes. Now we're casually discussing the fate of consciousness itself. Is that human humor? Human perspective. We're good at keeping things in proportion. Probably because we haven't forgotten what it's like to be small in a big universe. Krelnax settled beside her, his 6 legs folding with surprising grace. What will you do now? You've become one of the most important figures in the galaxy. Me? I'm going back to being an archaeologist. There are hundreds of predecessor sites we haven't explored yet. Now that we know what we're looking for, who knows what else they left behind? Still looking for answers? Always. That's what keeps life interesting. The predecessors understood that. It's not about reaching the destination, it's about never losing the curiosity that drives you to keep searching. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the predecessors waited in their ascended state, patient as eternity. And throughout the galaxy, young civilizations worked together, argued together, grew together, learning the lessons that would carry them toward whatever future they chose. Sarah thought about the sphere's final message to her, the one she hadn't shared with anyone else. The predecessors had chosen her not because humans were special, but because they were ordinary. Young. Flawed. Still learning. The best teachers, the predecessors had told her, are those who remember what it's like to be students. And Sarah, looking at the infinite expanse of space stretched before her, realized she would always be a student. Always learning. Always reaching. Always human. That, she thought, was exactly as it should be. The end.